Welcome back to Slash Stories, the channel where we dive into some of the most unbelievable stories shared online. Today's story comes from a guy who says he traveled almost 7,000 kilometers to meet a woman he had only known through the internet, and what happened that night ended up becoming one of the most uncomfortable experiences of his life. I'm 29 years old, and a few months ago I started talking to a girl from Colombia online. She's 23. What started as casual conversations quickly turned into something much more intense than either of us expected. We began chatting around October of 2025, and before long we were talking every single day. Sometimes those conversations lasted 4 or even 5 hours. Looking back, I realize how strange that probably sounds. Two people who had never met in person building such a strong emotional connection through a screen. But when you're in that situation, it doesn't feel strange at all. It feels real. We talked about everything. Our families, our childhoods, our dreams, and the things we wanted out of life. There were moments when the conversations became emotional and personal in ways I hadn't experienced with many people before. Sometimes she would say things like, "I wish you were here," or "I want you all to myself." She even admitted that she sometimes felt jealous if I mentioned other women in my life. Part of me knew this situation was risky. I was investing a lot of time and emotional energy into someone who lived thousands of kilometers away and who I had never actually met in real life. But after months of talking, the curiosity and the uncertainty started to drive me crazy. Eventually, I decided there was only one way to find out if what we had was real. So I bought a plane ticket and flew to Medellin. When I finally arrived in the city, I felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. This trip wasn't just a vacation. In my mind, it was the moment where our strange online relationship would finally become something real. But almost immediately after landing, something felt different. Her messages became shorter. She didn't reply as quickly as before. The enthusiasm that used to fill our conversations seemed to disappear overnight. At first, I tried to ignore it. Maybe she was nervous too. Maybe meeting in person was making her anxious. After all, we had spent months talking online, but had never actually seen each other face to face. Still, we had already agreed to meet for dinner that night. At around 8 p.m., I called an Uber to go pick her up. I had chosen a restaurant that several locals recommended. It wasn't overly fancy, but it had a good reputation and a comfortable atmosphere. Before seeing her, I took a quick shot of whiskey. My nerves were going crazy, and I figured a little liquid courage wouldn't hurt. When she finally walked toward the car, my first reaction was simple. She was stunning. Honestly, she looked even more beautiful than she did in her photos. For a brief moment, all my worries disappeared. I thought maybe the strange feeling I had earlier was just in my head. I greeted her with a kiss on the cheek, which is normal where I'm from. But the moment felt awkward. She barely reacted. Trying not to overthink it, I decided to keep the mood light. I joked around a bit during the ride to the restaurant and tried to make her feel comfortable. At one point in the Uber, I casually tried to hold her hand. The reaction was immediate and strange. Her hand felt completely stiff, almost like she didn't want any physical contact at all. It honestly felt like I had just grabbed the hand of a mannequin. That was the first moment when a little alarm bell started ringing in my head. At dinner, things didn't improve much. We talked, and she laughed a few times, but something was clearly missing. She barely asked me any questions and didn't seem very curious about my life or the long trip I had just made. I kept trying to maintain positive energy. I told stories, cracked a few jokes, and did my best to keep the conversation flowing. At one point, our faces were close while we were talking, and I tried to lean in for a small, subtle kiss. She pulled away immediately. "Relax," she said. That moment was incredibly awkward. After that, the distance between us became even more obvious. As if things weren't uncomfortable enough, she also started complaining about the food. She made a face like she didn't like anything on the table. At that point, I realized the night probably wasn't going the way I had imagined during those months of long phone calls. Still, I paid for the dinner and suggested we go to a nearby bar to continue the evening. The bar was actually a little better. The atmosphere was relaxed, the music was good, and we managed to have a few normal conversations. For a moment, I thought maybe things were improving. We stayed there for about an hour and a half. At one point, the waitress even smiled at us and said we looked like a cute couple. But inside, I felt like I was forcing the entire situation. Every conversation felt slightly strained. Every joke felt like it landed halfway. When we finally left the bar, I was still trying to remain hopeful. Maybe the night would end on a better note. But before I could even suggest anything else, she told me she was going home to sleep. That sentence hit me like a brick. After everything, the flight, the planning, the dinner, it felt like the evening was ending before it had even begun. We stood outside waiting for her Uber. I tried to keep the conversation going, but it felt empty. When her car arrived, I made one last attempt to kiss her goodbye. She pushed my face away. Not gently either. Her expression looked annoyed, almost disgusted. I pretended nothing happened. She got into the car, told me to be careful in that area of the city, and the Uber drove away. And just like that, I was standing alone on the street in Medellin at midnight, feeling like the biggest idiot in the world. I couldn't stop replaying the entire evening in my head. Had I done something wrong? Was I too nervous, too awkward, too eager? The thing that bothered me most was that she had seen plenty of photos of me before. It's not like she was surprised by how I looked in real life. I looked exactly the same as I did in my pictures. I had dressed nicely. I was polite. I paid for everything. I genuinely tried to create a good night for both of us. But she never thanked me. She never suggested doing anything. She never showed any real interest. The entire experience made me feel like I had wasted time, money, and a significant amount of dignity. What confused me even more was the fact that she had been the one encouraging me to visit for over a month. She kept asking when I was coming and told me I was taking too long. If she didn't actually want to see me, why insist on the trip in the first place? That night, I walked back to my apartment feeling embarrassed and strangely empty. Still, I had several days left in the city, and I didn't want the entire trip to be ruined by one bad experience. So I decided the next day that I would try to enjoy the city instead of sitting around feeling sorry for myself. After about 24 hours of feeling miserable, I decided to do something different. Instead of thinking about that awkward night, I went out and explored the city. Medellin is beautiful, and I didn't want to waste my time there. That's when something unexpected happened. I met another girl completely by chance. The meeting was casual and natural. We started talking, and right away I noticed something very different from the previous night. She was friendly. She asked questions. She seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We spent the day walking through different parts of the city. She showed me local places, introduced me to traditional food, and we talked for hours. Everything felt easy. There was laughter, real conversation, and a level of comfort that had been completely missing the night before. For the first time since arriving, I actually felt happy about the trip. Life can be strange sometimes. One day you feel completely rejected and embarrassed, and the next day you're sharing amazing moments with someone new. That experience helped me turn the page and stop thinking so much about the previous night. A few days later, something unexpected happened again. The first girl, the one I originally traveled to meet, sent me a message. She thanked me for the evening and said she had a great time. That message confused me more than anything. From my perspective, the night had been painfully awkward. I couldn't understand how she could possibly describe it as a great time. We ended up having a long conversation over WhatsApp. At one point, she even sent voice messages where she sounded emotional and started crying. She said she cared about me. But by that point, the damage had already been done. I told her honestly how the entire situation had made me feel. I explained that the way she treated me that night felt cold and disrespectful. I could understand if she wasn't interested romantically, That happens. But the level of distance and rejection she showed was impossible to ignore. She insisted that she still wanted to talk and maybe see each other again someday. But I told her it probably wasn't a good idea. The truth was simple. Talking to her again only made me relive how embarrassed I felt that night. So I decided to end things. I told her I didn't hold any resentment and wished her the best. She really was incredibly beautiful, and I hoped she would find happiness. But for me, the situation had already run its course. Looking back now, the entire experience feels surreal. Traveling thousands of kilometers for someone you've never met is always going to be a gamble. Sometimes the reality matches the fantasy you built online, and sometimes it doesn't. In my case, the first meeting was a disaster, but strangely enough, the trip still turned out to be worthwhile. If I hadn't taken that risk, I never would have explored the city the way I did or met the people I eventually met. Life has a funny way of working like that. You think you're heading toward one story, but along the way you end up discovering a completely different one. And sometimes the unexpected story turns out to be the better one. But that's today's story here on Slash Stories.